Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Terrace Podcast. I am your host, Craig Fowler, and we are back once again with a lower league podcast, as we always do for Thursday's show. Unfortunately, there is no Craig G. Telfer, there is no Shaughan McGuigan, but there is Fraser Clarke. Fraser, welcome back to the show.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be third in the pecking order. It's good to know where your mind goes when we're needing people for the lower league show. Where's Telfer? He's not about. Where's Shaughan? He's not about. Try Fraser. Oh, he's about. So that's fine. That's good. I know my place, and I'm fine with that.
Well, if the A team and the B team aren't available and you can choose whichever one of them applies to either person, that's fine with me. And then if you're happy being the C team, then you are joined by Christ knows what letter I would be. I'm not sure they've invented one yet when it comes to the lower league show. I'm very much filling in Z list. Let's go Z list. So it's the Z team and the C team.
It's a high quality podcast, and if that doesn't draw you in for an hour of lower league chat, then I don't know what will.
Marketing, always been my speciality, Fraser. Always good at selling myself. Yes, we are here to talk about the lower leagues, and we have got something in between the two patented schedules that we typically have for these type of shows, because our original plan was just to do the patented 3-game podcast. However, I kind of remembered after we decided on the 3 games that we were going to cover that there was another game we probably should have talked about. So it's not quite a grab bag, it's not quite 3 games, because it's 4 games we're going to be talking about. And when we're covering one of the games, I think we'll have a wider discussion on the situation at the bottom of League One. I think it's fair to say. But we shall begin with the first silverware dished out in the lower leagues this season. And that went to Airdrieonians, who defeated the New Saints at the Falkirk Stadium on Sunday with a 2-1 win. Looking back, so Fraser, I believe you watched this one. Before we get to kind of what happened during the game, I saw that in Pie and Bovril, the match forum, the kind of posters, some posters thought one way, some posters thought another. There was an Airdrie fan. I nearly said Rangers fan there. How can you tell the difference? There was an Airdrie fan.
10% of the listeners turned off already.
There was an Airdrie fan who said Pie and Bovril really turning itself in knots here, trying to figure out whether they want Airdrie to win or not. Because I think, so the Challenge Cup, when it first had these teams from Northern Ireland and from Wales, and has there ever been teams from Ireland, or was it just they two?
I think, no, I want to say there was teams in the Republic, but it wasn't the top teams. It was like some mid-table non-European teams or something, I think, but I might have made that up.
So since we started inviting them in, people, the kind of public opinion immediately was like, this is terrible, this is tin pot, this is rubbish, why are you doing this? But as time's gone on, I kind of thought that as well, but as time's gone on, I've changed my opinion. I know that Shaughan's going to change his opinion a little bit as well, and that we're kind of happy these teams are there because it does add a little bit of extra interest, and also it gives the opportunity for like a class away day for fans of teams who are not really going to have that before. The only way else you get that is if you are a Elgin fan and you're playing Stranraer or vice versa, but you actually get like proper trips that you're unlikely to get at any other stage in your football watching life, and it kind of fills a void of European football that you're not going to get if you're a lower league team. But at the same time, do we want one of these teams to actually win it? And Airdrie presented an interesting conundrum because nobody likes Airdrie. So Fraser, are you glad the Cup stayed in Scotland, or would you rather it went to Wales rather than Lanarkshire?
I'm probably going to contradict what you just said, and I actually don't mind Airdrie, which is very odd for a Suns fan, and considering what they did to our rivals Clydebank back in the day and all that kind of stuff. But see, since the Ian Murray era, like I've got quite a lot of Airdrie followers on Twitter. They were always really nice about me when I did the stream. So I've just kind of taken a wee soft spot for Airdrie, if you can have a soft spot for a club that seems to be widely hated by just about everyone else. So I was pleased to see them win it. I enjoy watching Airdrie. I really, really rate Rhys McCabe. They've got quite a lot of players that, when they were at Suns, like Callum Gallagher and Adam Frizzell, that I really liked. So I was pleased with Airdrie. And also, nothing seems to make me more patriotic than the Challenge Cup. It doesn't matter who it is. If they're playing one of the foreign teams, I'm just all of a sudden like, no, I'm all over that. Like, come on, Elgin, put the flipping team who finished third in the Welsh Premiership to bed or whatever. It just makes me really, really patriotic. So I was pleased Airdrie won it. And I also don't think, for all the people who like to post stuff about, the image of Scottish football and all that, don't think TNS winning it would have been great for the optics of Scottish football either.
That's probably fair. I don't think it's necessarily that. It's a low league competition, so if a team's elsewhere, like back in the day, they used to have the Technical Cup. We have had these cross-border competitions before, and I don't think it necessarily has to be an indictment on anybody's kind of level of football or whatever. But I take your point. As for the game itself, the new side started off very well. Before they even took their lead, Airdrie were given a real warning when former Villa youth prospect Brad Young missed an absolute sitter from about 3 yards out. To be fair to him, soon made up for that with the run for the goal cut back for Ben Clarke to score, and credit to Young as well, because and most, I think, the 99%, especially football in 2024, 99% of the players would have stayed down after he was completely cemented by Craig Watson, and yet he bounced back up, crossed it in, and Clarke managed to put it 1-0 ahead. And then Robbie Horn, not long after that, made a one-handed stop from Danny Redmond, where he kind of almost dived past it. And at that point, you're kind of thinking, this could get bad for wanting to come to stay in Scotland.
Yeah, TNS started like a team who were kind of on a world record, well, an attempted world record run of victories, because like they looked like a team who were just really packed with confidence. There wasn't really any nerves. You know, I don't imagine that they're going to get overly nervous playing a cup final, you know, at the Falkirk Stadium. It's not like walking out at Hampden in front of 50,000 or whatever, but there was no real signs of nerves. And you would have looked at them and thought, yeah, I can see why they're on this sort of run. There was nobody probably more delighted that Airdrie won than, is it Al Hilal fans or whoever it is that were on the on the world record run? Because I looked at that and I couldn't get my head around it at full time. Like, why are all these Arabic accounts posted on it? Like, what on earth's going on? And I had to look into it. But I'm not surprised. I mean, given that the level in the Welsh Premier League is, you know, will be considerably lower on average than Airdrie, I would imagine. I'm not surprised that they've been sweeping teams away left, right and centre in that. So, because they looked, and they look a lot better, I think, than the TNS team that Dumbarton played, going right back to 2017-18. That would have been, like, they look like a proper slick team, rather than maybe a team at that stage who had a bunch of solid Welsh League players and then these kind of smattering of inverted commas big names. Like they had John Routledge still there, I think, Stephen Saunders, and they had another couple of guys, I'm trying to think, who maybe played like higher up the non-league pyramid in England at that point. Whereas now they look like a much more dynamic team than that. Yeah,
it seems like they are getting a higher caliber player. If Declan McManus, who's a perfectly serviceable Scottish Championship striker, is unable to start for them in a game of this magnitude, he came off the bench, missed a late header. If he's not able to play, then it would certainly seem that they're a better side than they maybe were in years gone past. They also did not, like, fairly recently, like, take Victoria Pleasant to penalty kicks in a Europa League qualifying stage or some sort of European qualifying stage. That rings a bell.
I'm trying to think off the top of my head, and I don't follow them closely enough to know that. But I'm fairly certain that they're European adventures. They don't go out there and get beaten 10-0 by like the Latvian champions. Like, they are a fairly capable side, and probably based on that showing, you would say like they would hold their own in the championship. They'd probably be a solid mid-table championship side, maybe pushing towards the Premiership, maybe pushing towards or maybe, you know, dragged in towards the relegation playoffs or whatever. But yeah, they look like a competent full-time side by Scottish standards.
And they certainly, in this one, they certainly done themselves credit. They were, as I've mentioned, they were the better team in the first 20 minutes. They caused Airdrie some problems, particularly down the flanks. Airdrie kind of got wise to that and controlled most of the game, but even then, the last 15 minutes, it was a bit nervy for Airdrie holding on. They did have chances themselves to put the game fully to bed, but they had to survive that earlier McManus chance had. But I think, from an attacking standpoint, TNS were solid enough. Where they struggled was defensively. It seemed like the two it's a difficult name to say. Liam McStravick. Is that what we're going
with? That is how you say it, I would say.
Yep, cool. Liam McStravick chances. So he missed a very good chance. He then scored with a very nice finish. He then kind of had another couple of opportunities, but it seemed like every chance that Airdrie were getting in that first half in particular was just like a kind of a ball straight down the middle that just seemed to completely cut open their visitors. I don't think that counts as a cup final.
Well, I mean, they came to Scotland.
They travelled further.
Yeah, they came to Scotland, so they're definitely visitors in Scotland. Yeah, like McStravick's goal is brilliantly taken, but the defending's atrocious. Like, it's absolutely terrible. And I don't know. I suspect that they'll be used to, and again, like this is not with great knowledge of the Welsh League, they'll be used to attacking and bludgeoning teams and just having a lot of the ball in the final third, and they looked really comfortable in that. They probably won't be used to facing teams with the quality that Airdrie have going forward. And that maybe got highlighted quite clearly. So you've got a side who are very confident, very comfortable attacking games, but who are maybe not used to a team coming onto them that much. And I'm guessing most of the teams that they'll play down in Wales will play almost like, teams up here play against the Old Firm. So they'll think, right, we'll keep it tight, we'll try and frustrate them and then try and hit them on the break. Whereas they had an Airdrie side that kind of went toe-to-toe with them. And that's something that maybe they just didn't have that defensive quality, probably as well because they don't need it in the Welsh League. They didn't have that defensive quality to keep Airdrie out, although I think that they'll be pretty cross at the goals, losing one from the penalty spot, and losing one with McStravics, which is basically straight down the middle. Yeah, I think they'll be maybe a wee bit disappointed to lose that world record run on the quality of the goals that they've lost.
They were also facing an Airdrie side, which was a bit undermanned as well. So Josh Ray, he was out for this game. I mentioned earlier that the keeper that was in goals was Robbie Horn. He was brought in from Rotherham, I believe it was, at the start of the month. Ray suffered a very nasty and serious head knock in the match against Inverness, which meant he was still in hospital a couple of days later. And I saw somebody saying on Pie and Bother, I tried to look it up on Google to get it confirmed, but I saw somebody saying that he's like, it was as serious as like a bleed on the brain, like, which is career threatening. But I don't know, I couldn't see anybody reacting to that. And like I said, I Googled to try and see some sort of press story about it. Couldn't see that either. But he was missing for them. They were also without Lewis McGregor, Gabby McGill, Murray Aitken, and they were also without Kayano Megwa and Aaron Lyle, who was probably their best player of the match before. So there was certainly a number of changes that had to be made for this one. They were further weakened during the game as well. So McCabe himself went off at the break to be replaced by D. McMaster. And then also in the second period, McStravic himself had to go off. But it was another sub who ended up helping them out, get the victory. Josh O'Connor, probably a disappointing season overall from him. He was, obviously there was a lot of buzz at him at Easter Road because he is the son of Gary O'Connor, and Gary O'Connor is a big hero, obviously, with the Hibs fans from his previous spell. Hibs fans desperate for Josh O'Connor to be the same. He's on loan at Airdrie this season. He's only scored 4 goals in 28 games. The chances of him doing anything at Hibs seem very slight if you're not performing to those levels in the Scottish Championship. But he got his body in front of Josh Pask, won the penalty. Nikolai Tordorov converted it and then ran to the bench and got Josh Ray's goalie shirt and held it up to the fans.
Yeah, I'm always never sure if I like that sort of thing. Like, unless somebody's actually died, I just think it looks a bit daft.
If he does, if he has an injury as serious as that man was saying on Pie and Bovril, then I think it's actually fair enough. But if he's just out with concussion and he's going to be back in a couple of weeks, then I would agree with you.
Yeah, I think, there's a time and a place to do something like that, like quite an emotional tribute. And yeah, if it is, potentially career threatening, life endangering even. I mean, I've never had a bleed in the brain, but I don't imagine it's a very pleasant thing, and I can imagine that the consequences of it could be quite serious. Then yeah, fair enough. But if it's, like you say, if it's a concussion, if he's just got a big lump in his head from where he's been whacked, then maybe a wee bit over the top.
Like when Aberdeen did it for Rubizic earlier in the season, he's just out for 3 months with a knee injury.
Yeah, that sort of stuff just...
And he's also shit.
Yeah, well, there's that aspect too. So then it's just really embarrassing. I think I'd be mortified. See if I just had a broken ankle. I don't think I'd want people acting as if I'd passed away. But maybe that makes other players feel loved. So maybe it works.
yeah, it builds team camaraderie, maybe.
What was it? You'll never be at your own funeral. You'll never see your own funeral, or whatever that people say. Well, this is the next best thing.
They should have brought out a box and laid the top down on top of it. Whatever box they're keeping the cup in, put it down on that.
Yeah, it'd be a really fitting tribute, really emotional. It'd be like that scene from The Traitors if you watched it, when that woman got buried in front of her son.
No, I don't watch that show. Sorry, what?
There was this mother and son on it, but nobody knew that they were a mother and son, and they had to kill off one of the traitors, or one of them had to die. I can't really remember how that happened. And Diane basically ended up getting put in a coffin in front of her son, which I think I would have found quite challenging. Especially if nobody knew that was my mum, and I had to see her getting into a coffin and effectively be at her funeral. I would find that quite uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah. I've never watched that show. Maybe I should. A lot of people have recommended it.
If that's drawn you in, and I hate reality TV, but I ended up quite involved in it, quite emotionally invested in it, and it also meant that I could finally talk to my colleagues about reality TV, because I just have no idea what's going on if they're talking about Love Island. But when it comes to Traitors, I ended up quite hooked.
I used to watch Love Island, but not anymore. I just didn't. Never have the time. Never have the time anymore. Ever since, I think. Yeah, did we first? Aye, I think when I last watched Love Island, it was before patreon.com/Terrace Podcast was a thing.
Did you ever glance at it when Uzi C was on it? Just to,
no, I wanted to. Like, right, if I'm going to get back in it, it's going to be when a Scottish lower league footballer's on it. But I just couldn't find the time to fit in, because it's like an hour, like 5 times a week.
Yeah, for like what feels like 6 months. I mean, I don't think it's that long, but it does feel like that. So no, it's a big commitment. I watched wee clips with Uzi C, and to be honest, that was quite enough. Just found it really, really quite painful. Not as painful as him with his own fan account on Instagram, mind you. But you know,
yes, yeah. But you guys brought that up last week, so let's not go over old ground. And a group of people who found something painful this past weekend was Ayr United fans, as they were beaten 2-1 at home by Queen's Park. Now, Fraser, I loved watching the highlights of this, because now Queen's Park only scored 1 goal through this means, and that was the second goal, which was a shocker from Jack Sanders, gets caught in possession on the very edge of his own penalty area by Rory Payton. Rory Payton then rolls it to Killian Sheridan, who has a lovely little finish where he just dinks it. I think he was actually meaning to kind of dink it go around the keeper, but he just put so much on it that he just allowed it to travel into the net, and that was fine. That had come after Queen's Park had already taken the lead with a great Louis Longridge cross for Payton to open the scoring. But there was so many other instances, and I counted 5 in total, just in these 9.5 minutes highlights. 5 instances of Ayr United getting caught on the ball 25 yards from their own goal and Queen's Park having a chance from it. The one that Queen's Park really, really should have scored was when Jack Turner robbed Harry McHugh, I believe it was, and then done a kind of a give and go with Sheridan, and he was like, got the ball back about 6 yards out with his mercy and hit it right at the keeper. But time and time again, Ayr did this. I just didn't learn their lesson.
No, and the bit that I couldn't understand about it was that I was watching those highlights. I didn't know how the second goal came about. But if you'd asked me about 4 minutes into those highlights, I would have put good money that it would have came from Ayr being caught in the ball. So if I can see that the Ayr players were clearly, like, they're not having a great season. They're in a wee bit of a relegation battle. They're playing the Scottish Championship. I don't know how windy it was down there. It was certainly really windy at the Suns game. I'm guessing Ayr was probably quite windy, which isn't, particularly fantastic for playing out from the back either. Why did they persevere with that? And I'm all for, we want to play football the right way and all that. This was a relegation, like quite a crunch relegation game. Given that Queen's Park, I think, were behind Ayr going into it, and Ayr had got a couple of decent results beforehand, and this drags them right into it, and they looked like they were their own worst enemy. I saw a post on Pine Bovril, I think it was after it, that described it as a 2-1 pumping, and based on the highlights, I'd say that was quite accurate. Like, that looked like Queen's Park, if they'd won that game 3-0, that probably would have been a relatively fair reflection of things. Like, they looked like they had identified weaknesses in Ayr's game and just kept trying to exploit them and maybe just didn't take the chances. It was Payton's goal, the first goal. How many times did they try that in-swinging cross to try and get the ball basically to drop right in the 6-yard box? I think they kind of knew that Josh Clarke wasn't going to come out for it, and that there was obviously maybe a weakness in the Ayr defence that they could exploit with that in-swinging cross. They kept trying it, and eventually the goal came. Again, from an Ayr point of view, surely you're looking at that going, right, there's a couple of warning signs. Stop the cross early. Don't let him get it onto his left foot and curl it in like that. It just, if I was an Ayr fan, I'd be really, really concerned, not just by the performance, but by the fact that they didn't seem to learn during the game and adapt to that.
Yeah, that is certainly the most concerning thing. And you think like a manager, like you always just make these assumptions, and I don't know why we do, because there's been numerous players that have gone into management where you think, well, they played at this level, they done this, they used the most of their abilities, they played in pragmatic teams, they played in teams that kept the ball, they done it all. So their manager, they'll know everything. They'll know everything. They have this experience and know everything. But typically they do get tunnel vision and zero in on something that they want to do, and it really seems like Scott Brown was too slow in telling his players to stop this. They are clearly wise to this. They are shutting us down very quickly. We're giving away too many chances. Let's stop doing it. And if he does that, see even if he does it at half time, because there was things he did change in this game, because they started with a back four, but a problem for Ayr at this moment in time is that they don't have a left back. So Frankie Bastonda was away on international duty and apparently picked up an injury and is going to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. Patrick Reedon was already out of this game, and Nathan McGinley, who was brought in on loan from Motherwell but hasn't played, or had really not played at all. I think it's on loan from Motherwell, am I right in saying that?
He was certainly at Motherwell, wasn't he? So
he was certainly at Motherwell. Let me just double check here. I've got nearest toe poker up. Oh, it's not. He's not listed. He's not listed among decided. That doesn't help me at all. Nathan McGinley.
He's vanished off the face of the earth.
It's recently, or was he just out of football? All right, sorry. So he left in mutual consent in January, and then was later picked up by Ayr United. I think only at the start of this month. It's been that recent that it's not even there on his Wikipedia page. It's on his transfer market page, and that's all I'm finding. Can I get a date? Can I get a date for this transfer, please? This is good audio, this. Yeah, he was picked up on the 1st of March. So he was recently in the squad, but was not quoted for this one, so it seems like he's out as well. And that's something that our fans aren't happy about, is that they feel like they're not getting updates about players who are injured. But that means now that's 3 left. If he's injured for any length of time, that's 3 left backs now that are out for them. And so for this game, they played Shaughan McGinty at left back. Yeah, your smile sums it up. And they then switched to a more palatable, I would say, 3 at the back for the second period. But he didn't tell his players to stop fanning about at the back and letting Queen's Park get the ball off them too easily. And you got to be reactive. If you want to be a manager that lives up to the name of you as a player, you have to be adaptable. And it certainly seemed like in this game Brown wasn't.
I was staggered to see Shaughan McGinty at left back. I think he's maybe unfortunate in that he's one of these players who, see, if you watch him, probably 90% of the time, he's absolutely fine as a kind of head it, kick it away, tackle people, centre half, like a kind of no-nonsense centre half. But the problem is, if you watch him in highlights, you get players, attacking players particularly, who look amazing in highlights, but they only do 3 good things all game. But you watch a 7-minute highlights package and all 3 are in. You think he must have had a cracking game. McGinty's kind of the opposite. You don't see all the good stuff that he does, I assume, but whenever he's on the ball or whenever he's kind of near the ball, in a highlights package, you're like, there's probably going to be something funny that happens here. Like, he's probably going to fall over, he's probably going to lose possession. And just the idea of playing him at left back, I understand he's left-footed. Aside from that, that seemed like a really, really odd call. When 3 at the back, you go, right, okay, we don't have a left back, so let's go to 3 at the back. We've got the players who could be, competent in doing that. And McGinty is a left centre back, fine. McGinty is a left back. I didn't like the idea of that at all.
And you're right, I'm talking about Ayr. Ayr seem in a bit of trouble, because it does look like, if you look at the teams at the bottom of the championship, so they're in 8th place right now. They're 3 points above Inverness, Caledonian Thistle. They do have a game in hand, it has to be said, and that is certainly helps their chances. But if you look at the teams directly above them, so you've got Queen's Park. So Queen's Park, we should mention that we'll come on to talk about them a little bit more in depth. But if we just kind of look at their form, they have lost only 2 of the last 11 games since Callum David. Sorry, they've lost only 2 of the last 12 games, because what I quoted there was only Callum Davidson's. But of course, they won the game before Callum Davidson came into the club, and that was their first win in months. So they're upwardly mobile. You've also got, above them, you do have Greenock Morton, who are in freefall, and they're only 2 points ahead of Ayr, which is wild. When you think Morton, you're like, they might be going up. Everybody might have a team in the Premier League, and then George Oakley gets injured, and all of a sudden that falls apart. But Oakley, I believe I'm right in saying that Oakley returned for the match against Dunfermline at the weekend. Yeah, he did. So that's going to be huge for Morton, especially with the style of football that they play. They need Oakley because they don't have any other focal point in attack for the kind of brand of football. So I would expect them to kind of bounce back a bit. Then you're looking at Airdrie too far away. Dunfermline are in better form now. It kind of feels like it's only going to be between 2 clubs. That game in hand could be big for Ayr, but at the same time, they're not. They've gone win-loss under Brown, but things seem a bit weird there. What have you made of Brown so far in charge at Somerset?
I said a couple of weeks ago that it felt like the jury was very much still out, and I think it is.
Yes.
But I don't know how much of it I'm being taken in by the fact it's Scott Brown. So I look at him and I think, well, he was really impressive as a player. You know, he did fine at Fleetwood, didn't pull up any trees, but it seemed like it went absolutely fine. It wasn't a disaster. So you kind of, you know, that when you talk about teams sleepwalking to relegation, you don't really notice them, and then you just go, whoa, like all of a sudden, there's a team that's, you know, finished 9th or finished 10th in the last day or whatever. And I do wonder if that could be them. I said last week, I think it was last week, that Inverness were still my tips to finish 9th. I think they still are.
I would agree with you.
They just look the weakest, and Duncan Ferguson's stint down south, like if the jury's out on Scott Brown, I think jury's still definitely out on Duncan Ferguson. What it's not out on is about his...
If you're talking about his down south record, the jury has come back with a unanimous verdict of pish.
Yes, of unmitigated failure, and I don't really trust him. I feel like I might trust Scott Brown a wee bit more just to get Ayr over the line. What I would say is that if they play anything like this in the remaining games, they're in major trouble. And to be fair, by all accounts, Inverness, I think, played quite well at Tannadice. Now, obviously, that, I don't know if it was a freak goal from Louis Moat, you want to call it that, a moment of genius or whatever. Like, that aside, Inverness seemed to play really, really well there. I didn't see that coming. I thought Dundee United, even in spite of the form they're in, would have enough to just get by Inverness. So maybe there's something there for Inverness, in which case, Ayr are the only other club I think that they could catch.
I think so. I had Andrew Young on the Patreon. Was it last week? It must have been last week. I believe it was. And he actually said, like, he wouldn't have been surprised if they got a result at Tannadice, because it was the type of team they do well against. Because what Ferguson's done well at Inverness is that he's kind of made the defence and made them a lot kind of harder to beat, but they're not a great team to watch. They don't really have much going forward, and it's going to be hard for them to go out and defeat teams to pick up the 3 points that are going to be required in a few of the remaining matches to keep them definitely up in the championship table. There's one thing I wanted to get your opinion on Ayr United, though, before we talk briefly about Queen's Park and then move on. So reading about Ayr was quite confusing, because you didn't know, because fans are like, right, 4 or 5 players have been signed. I think maybe 4 players. 4 players signed to January. The jury's very much out on all of them. And then you're like, oh, well, Scott Brown's not signed well. But then you're kind of reading more into it, and it's like, well, Graham Matthey's there. And he was obviously head of recruitment at Hibs, or whatever job it was, sporting director, I think. And they've also got their own head of recruitment themselves, Ayr United. In, let me just bring the name up, Keith Glendenning. And I know that when they were hiring, they wanted a manager. They told the candidates applying for the job that they didn't want anybody unless they were willing to play football from the back, basically play passing football. If you didn't play passing football, or football quote unquote the right way, then you weren't just going to be you weren't going to be considered. On the one hand, you could look at this and you could say, well, oh, that's great. Like, you've got a managing director who was at one point seen as quite progressive in the top flight. You brought in a head of recruitment to try and give you an edge over some of your opponents when you're only a small part-time club, and you're trying to play football that's entertaining the fans. This all seems very forward-thinking and very progressive, and if you stick with this long-term strategy, it's going to reap dividends. You just need a bit of patience. On the other hand, you could be sceptical, and you could say, does a club of Ayr United's stature need this? Do you actually what you actually want is to maybe bring in a manager who's a bit more comfortable with the players he is playing, because he is the one who has definitely signed them, and to just leave the kind of football part of it in charge to him, because I don't think you can have that at the highest level anymore. I think they're just spreading yourself too thin, and Craig Levine at Hearts is a perfect example of that. But still, when you're Ayr United and you're in that level of clubs that is just above part-time level, are these strategies, are these things required?
It seems like the whole playing out from the back thing seems a bit strange for Ayr. So you look at Callum Davidson's obviously came in at Queen's Park, done a really, really decent job there. Callum Davidson wasn't exactly playing, prime Pep Guardiola, tiki-taka football at St Johnstone. Like, they were pretty awful to watch for the most part. To be fair, his Queen's Park team, based on this, looked good. It seems like a weird requirement to have as a club who are always at risk of relegation from the Championship. So, if you came in and maybe Dundee United they said, right, we want a manager coming in to take us in the Championship with the biggest budget to play really good football and to get us promoted. I could understand that. But for a club like Ayr, it seems like the first objective every season for them has to be to avoid relegation. And almost anything on top of that, and Ayr fans might not like me saying it or might feel like I'm wrong on that, anything on top of avoiding relegation from the Championship is a bonus. So I would look at them in the same way as I would have looked at Morton probably and say, you know, if they finish 5th in the league, that's probably quite a successful season. Anything beyond that is really, really successful. Now, I don't know how much last season maybe influenced that, because Lee Bullen, I mean, ultimately you can't argue with where they finished in the league. Like that was an excellent performance, but they were pretty awful to watch a lot of the time. And I know the fans had big gripes about that. So I wonder if that's maybe played on their mind with this next appointment. Let's get somebody in to play good football. But it does seem kind of like overkill for, like you say, a kind of smaller full-time club, that not only do we want a manager to come in and win games, we want a manager to come in and win games and play some really gorgeous football when we're in a league that is their level. You know, they've not got a huge budget, I don't imagine, for that level. So it seems like quite a big ask. And if there was a manager out there who could go into Ayr, play gorgeous football and get them into the top 4, probably wouldn't be at Ayr. He'd probably be at a bigger club. And if he was at Ayr and he went in and had them revolutionising the way that they were playing and they were winning games every week, he'd very quickly be snapped up by a Premiership club. So it seems like really high expectations, no problem with having high standards, but maybe like a degree of realism is required. And if you're Scott Brown and you say, yeah, I'll play it from the back, I'll do all this, then you go in and you play the most direct, like I'm thinking David Hopkins style Livingston, but you get them to the Premiership, do you get sacked? You know, sorry, Scott, that was a great achievement, but see your style of play, it was dreadful to watch. That doesn't happen. So fundamentally, if they're winning games, I don't think fans and I don't think the board really should care too much about the style. But at the moment, the worry is they're not winning games and they don't look like they have a squad that's capable of playing the standard of football they want to.
That cannot be said about Queen's Park at this moment in time. And before we move on, the player we should really focus on is Killian Sheridan, because when he was signed for Queen's Park, so there was a section on A View for the Terrace a few weeks ago. It was one of the kind of player sections where you bring a few players, and Killian Sheridan was mentioned as a possibility for this section, and Shaughan and Telfer essentially vetoed it. They were like, I don't want to do this because I don't want to talk him up. He was on the show before. He was a decent guy. We don't want to slag him off. And there's just going to be nothing nice to say about him because he was at Dundee and done absolutely fuck all. He was at Inverness and done absolutely fuck all. He's had a really bad time with injuries. It kind of seems like he's done in his career. And this just looks like a completely pointless signing from Queen's Park. That wasn't right. That certainly wasn't right. He's been just excellent every week and was excellent again in this game and scored. What has happened? How is this the same guy who was at Inverness earlier this season?
He looks absolutely magnificent. He just looks so good to watch above all else. You would enjoy going and watching that performance, and him and Rory Payton up front, they look like they just work together so well. Everything that Rory Payton's weak at, Killian Sheridan's good at, and everything that Killian Sheridan's weak at, Rory Payton's good at. So they've got this perfect partnership going there. And I didn't see it coming. I thought, when I saw he was released by Inverness, I actually wondered if he might end up in League Two. And I was like, well, Dumbarton could do with that. Or, you look at him, he's not done much. It would be a gamble, I would say. See if any club in League Two signed him, we'd have been like, right, okay, bit of a gamble, but I wondered if he might rock up at us or, at Steny because they needed an additional striker or something like that. So I was really surprised to see him going to Queen's Park. Then really surprised to see him playing. And then, when was it that he scored his first goal? I think it was the Arbroath game. Now, Arbroath were atrocious at the back in that. But I was like, he's got a goal. I think he had a goal and 2 assists in the first half. I was so excited to watch the highlights, and they were just excellent. He looks absolutely class. He's a player transformed, and I think he's always been quite a good player who's been held back by injuries. He's had a decent career. He's played at quite a high level for a lot of that time, especially out in Europe and stuff, which again, I really like it to see players, okay, he's not a Scottish player, but kind of a player with quite a strong past in the Scottish game going out to Europe and making a bit of a name for himself. But I did not see this coming. And I just think it's great. The Killian Sheridan Indian summer, for as long as it goes on for, I'm fully on board with watching it. And it's also must be something that Inverness are looking up at, and Queen's Park are going, thanks very much for warming him up for us, but we'll take it from here. Just pull away from you in the league. Him and Sean Welsh. I thought it was weird letting Sean Welsh go, and they've done that as well. And both of them, I think, have been very, very decent for Queen's Park.
Well, if Inverness are not careful and these decisions come back to bite them in the arse and they are playing in League One, they will be doing so with one of these two next teams that we will be talking about, possibly two of the next teams we'll be talking about. That is Annan Athletic and Kelty Hearts, who played out a very interesting game between the sides at Gallowbank. 3-2 to the home side. Kelty in the opening period looked like they had chances of their own, but they couldn't really defend whatsoever. They just continually allowed an Annan player to get in behind. Either that was from taking the ball and just running past their marker, as Benjamin Lucent did for the opening goal with a nice wee change of pace. Then Aidan Smith done it for the second. Smith scored the first. Smith then cut back for Lewis Hunter to score the second. Or a through ball, like you saw with the third for Lucent, like just scoring on the counter-attack. You also had, very early in the highlights, Lucent and Josh Galloway almost scoring one of the team goals of the season between them, as they just played this kind of interchange of passes all the way up the pitch and then laid it on for Tommy Goss, who had his shot saved. Thinking, right, that's it. Annan Athletic been in great form of late. Kelty got a big result last midweek against Alloa, but they lost 5 in a row before then. That's it. Game over. Not so much. Michael Tidser, the Kelty player manager, brought them into the game right before half-time with an excellent strike off the post, and then just 3 minutes at the second half, Craig Johnson brought it back to 3-2. It then, Fraser, seemed to be the main stand camera angle then packed in, and the rest of the highlights were then recorded at sea level, which you could really not really make out too much of what was going on, but it still looked like there was a late, brilliant save from Greg Fleming to secure the points for Annan Athletic, which now means that Annan have picked up 17 points from their last 10 games, having only picked up 30 from their previous 20. What is happening at the Gallowbank? How come they are so good all of a sudden?
How much fun does it look to be an Annan fan at the moment, or an Annan player at the moment? See, at the end of those highlights, they had, bits where they were just going past all the fans, high-fiving them. Like, there's something kind of magical going on there. It feels like they were a bit taken aback at the start of the season by the step up to League One. Now they've adapted to it, and they look like they're just having a really good time. They're having a go. They're a brilliant team to watch. Yeah, they're very open defensively. I mean, I've only seen them live once, and that was the 5-4 game with Suns back in November. Very open defensively, but so good going forward that it doesn't seem to matter. Like, they just back themselves to outscore you. And like, Benji Lusant's performance in this game looked like so good. Like, his goal his set-up play for the first goal is terrific. His goal, watching it, reminded me of Yaya Toure. The big strides forward, and then just like the really smooth, deft finish. Like, he just powers away from people, and he's going really quickly, but it doesn't look like he is. Do you know, he just kind of glides over the turf, and he's been a player that, so I saw him quite a lot last season when Suns obviously played them six times, and he looked like there might be something there, but he was a bit rough around the edges, and I thought, I don't fancy his chances of making it in League One. Looks like he's been really good this season. He's like really came onto a game and really stepped up for that level of football, and it feels like just all around them there's a growing belief. And what we also should say is, like, they didn't have to win that game, but with Queen of the South winning and with Stirling Albion winning, they couldn't really afford to lose it, in spite of how good form they're in. Like, they're still 9th in the league, but that sort of thing, like, they don't look like a team battling relegation. So Queen of the South, saw them obviously on TV a couple of weeks ago against Falkirk, and saw them against Montrose a few weeks before that. Like, the whole mood around the place just looks like a team in a relegation battle. Stirling Albion, maybe a wee bit better, because obviously they came up last season as well, but again, look like a team who are kind of scrapping for their lives. Annan just look like they're happy to be here. Like, here for a good time, not a long time sort of vibe about Annan, and they look like so much fun to watch. I enjoyed those highlights because you had two teams who couldn't really defend, but defending's really boring. So it was just two teams absolutely going balls out and attacking. Like, Kelty's first half performance, defensively they deserved to be 3-0 down, but offensively they maybe should have scored even before they went behind. I think they had a couple of half decent chances. It looked like a really, really entertaining game. And I said it last week and I'll reiterate it now. Of all the teams that I wouldn't want Dumbarton to play in the playoffs, it would be Annan, because I think they will win the playoffs. If they go into the playoffs, I think they'll win them.
And you talked about the players who... So there was still... The majority of the team was still the side that kind of came up last season and was then put together at the beginning of this campaign. And you're probably right that it has taken them a bit of time just to kind of get used to the league and then kind of get the confidence that they belong and then to start motoring and start picking up results. They have, however, also they added to their team in January. So they made 4 signings in total. One of them's been very incidental. Rico Katongo was brought in. He has played only twice. He was an unused sub in this game. Another unused sub was Jacques
Herity?
Is that where we're going? Herity?
I believe so.
Jack Herity. He was, again, an unused sub, but he was a substitute goalkeeper that was brought in when Annan were needing a keeper due to an absence from Greg Fleming, and he managed to fill in as they kind of started to build up this run. And furthermore, the ones that played the bigger impact, Josh Walker, midfielder, in and out of the team, mainly come off the bench. I think there maybe only won one game in which he started, but he did score that late winner at Hamilton Accies, which really seemed to propel this fine run. And the player who got the most headlines, even though he's only got 2 and 11, he does start pretty much every week, and he does give them something different in attack, and that is Michael Dewaney, who joined from Newcastle United, a player with Premier League experience, having come off the bench in Newcastle for a game, I believe, against Chelsea, and also then being on the bench for a Champions League game. Goes on loan to Annan. I don't know if you know the story. I don't know the story. Why? What's the levels here don't seem to match up. Is his loan to Annan a favour, or was him playing? With all due respect to Annan, was him playing in the Premier League a favour? Because it just doesn't make much sense if you think that he's good enough to play a Premier League game for your club, that you would then put him into the bottom end of the third tier in Scottish football.
And I think, see, when you sign a player from a big club down south in particular, 9 times out of 10 it doesn't work. 9 times out of 10 they're squad fillery rubbish for that level. So you had, is it Cameron Ferguson, Duncan Ferguson's son, came up from Newcastle on loan at Forfar and looked awful in a Forfar team that had a kind of array of really ineffective strikers. But what I like about Ndweni is that he seems to have, he's really bought into it. So it'd be quite easy to be like, I've played in the Champions League. Okay, it's not like you're signing a guy who's got that much experience, but he can come in and be like, this is so beneath me. I'm playing in front of 300 people, a tiny wee stadium for a club I've never heard of, in a town I've never heard of, in the lower reaches of Scottish football. But he doesn't. He looks like he's really using it as an opportunity and really enjoying it. And you know what? That's such a great thing. Not just in terms of his attitude, but if you're an Annan fan, what a buzz you're getting off having a player on loan from a club like Newcastle who looks like he cares about your club. And I think that's just, like I said, that it feels like there's something magical at Gallowbank, and it feels like all the players are kind of bought into it. And he looks like he's just really enjoying, I guess, being a superstar. Who wouldn't enjoy that? And being, it must be nice when you think, or you'll certainly believe, that you're probably the best player there, when you'll be, I'm assuming, still training full-time with Newcastle, and then you go up, so you're maybe training with, even if he's training with Newcastle's under-23s or whatever, to then go up, you're going to be so sharp in training, I would imagine, and then feel like a bit of a superstar at that level, feel like a big player. And you see that so much, especially with attacking players. If they feel loved, they're so much more effective, and I think that's maybe what he's seen. And yeah, like you say, it's not like he's came up and banged in a goal every game or setting, he looks like a good player for that level, doesn't look head and shoulders above it. But I really like his attitude to go and take that loan spell. And you know what? If things don't work out in Newcastle, which, given the size of the club and the transfer budget and all that, and the fact he's on loan at Annan, probably unlikely. But what's to say that Falkirk don't take a look at him and think, oh, we'll take him, or even a club maybe potentially further up go, well, you know what? We saw this guy, fits and starts at Annan, he's got a good calibre coming from Newcastle, and he goes on to have a decent career either up here or somewhere down south.
Should probably talk about the other clubs before we move on to our final game. Kelty, so that is 6 defeat and 7 for them, which isn't great, but their 5 defeats in a row were against all 5 teams in the division above them. They also had a bit of injury problems while they were going through that. So while they are very much trending in the wrong direction, there are mitigating circumstances for that. And I think there is a decent amount of confidence that Kelty are still going to be all right. Do you share that confidence?
Yeah, I think they'll be fine. What I would say is, I think I'm right in saying, because I looked into this and then had to reread it a couple of times, they've only won back-to-back games in the league once this season. That was against Queen of the South in Edinburgh. Now, granted, that was before Edinburgh completely, disintegrated, so they were a slightly different side at that point. I think they're just wildly inconsistent. I think they'll be fine. they got obviously that terrific result against Alloa, and by all accounts they were, they looked really, really good against Alloa midweek a couple of weeks ago. And then to follow up with this is disappointing, but probably not surprising given that this is what they do. They win a game, then they lose a game, and they've just never really strung together a great run of form this season. I think they'll be fine, because I think there's enough there that they will pick up, like that result against Alloa, they'll pick up a result against that. I think they've had quite a difficult run of games as well recently, so they will be fine. I'll be interested to see where they go next season. It feels like they've been on that really positive trajectory up, and they've now kind of found their place. And their place is with Stirling Albion, with Annan, with Steny when they go up this season, potentially with a playoff winner, and they're going to probably bob between 7th in League One or there or thereabouts in the top 4 in League Two. And that's absolutely fine. Like, that looks like their place as a club. And I think it's always interesting when you see a club who has came up through the divisions begin to settle. So Edinburgh, you'd think, had kind of found their place before everything went tits up on them. And their place was probably, again, bobbing between League Two and League One. Cove, not quite sure where Cove's place is. I think they might be in it at the moment, but they don't have great gates. They feel still quite artificial, quite propped up. So I'm not sure where their place is. We're still to find that. Bonnyrigg, I think their place is at the moment at the lower end of League Two, which we'll obviously come on to talk about. But yeah, I feel like Kelty are now, all the excitement, all the buzz, all the razzmatazz, all the big money is gone, and this is just them becoming an established, solid SPFL part-time side.
So the current situation at the bottom of League One, well, not the very bottom because that's Edinburgh on just 5 points, but above them is Annan. Annan are still in 9th place, but there's now 4 points separating those 4 teams for that relegation place. Kelty are in 6th. And then you have Stirling Albion and Queen of the South, both of whom won this past weekend. Queen of the South with a surprising victory away to Annan Athletic, who have been in largely very good form ever since Andy Graham came into the manager's job, while Stirling got a 90-second winner through Kieran Offord in their match against Montrose. So that is shaping up to be a cracking finish to the campaign in League One. All teams, I should also add, have got Edinburgh City to play. So there's no advantage with somebody picking up an easy 3 points, but also at the same time, Edinburgh do make it difficult for everybody, and you wouldn't be entirely surprised if this run-in is decided by whoever manages to fall to Edinburgh, and like Queen of the South did the last time they played them, end up just getting a draw instead of the victory. But a similarly tight race at the bottom is in League Two. Clyde are continuing to creep up. They got a draw this past weekend. They are now 2 points behind Stranraer in 9th. Just ahead of Stranraer on goal difference only is Bonnyrigg Rose, who were beaten 2-0 at Dumbarton. Your Dumbarton, Fraser Clarke. The second victory in succession for Dumbarton. But the big headlines after this one were belonging to Bonnyrigg because they decided to part ways with manager Robbie Horn and replace him with Cowdenbeath's Callum Elliott. Before we get on to that, you can also listen to a Patreon podcast I did with Amy Canavan. We first of all talked about the Sky Sports Cup final between Partick Thistle and Rangers on Sunday, but then Amy gave her thoughts on, or despairing thoughts really, on Bonnyrigg Rose and the decision to let go of Robbie Horn, the manner in which they did it, and doing it this late in the campaign. But Fraser, first of all, how were Bonnyrigg during this match at the weekend in the derby of the teams with the most disgraceful pitches?
It's the one time when a club can't turn up and complain about our pitch because it's just the same. So it's just both sides are used to it.
Worse, maybe?
Yeah, I think they're both really bad in slightly different ways, and I'd probably need to play on them both before I can tell you which one was worse. So, like, if you just gave me a ball in 10 minutes just to kick it about, then I'll come back and report on which is worse. Bonnyrigg were terrible on Saturday. They were really, really poor. And I spoke to 3 people between walking from my seat down to where we do post-match, and all 3 were like, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. Oh, they're in big trouble. So I'm not surprised in terms of acting on Robbie Horn. I feel for him because he seems like a genuinely terrific guy. He's done a phenomenal job there. And I think he'll always be viewed, certainly by the fans, as like a Bonnyrigg legend for what he's done. The cup win against us, first of all, which we can just get that one out of the way, but also being the man to take them into the SPFL. It feels short term is maybe the wrong word to use here, because I'm not surprised to see Robbie Horn moving on, but it feels like they thought, oh shit, we might need to win 2 games to stay up. If we can get a new manager in, get a new manager bounce, if they go and win, they've got, is the Stranraer game this weekend, I think they've got, like, they can go and get a new manager bounce, win their next 2 games, they'll be safe. And they just thought, under Robbie Horn, oh, maybe that's a risk. Where I see it potentially backfiring 2 ways. Firstly, is if you went down to the Lowland League and you're Bonnyrigg Rose, who would you want in charge? Probably Robbie Horn, a man who knows the league inside out, really experienced at that level, track record of success at that level. But secondly, it feels like if it doesn't work out for Callum Elliott, I just think it's a really interesting appointment. Based on, his record in the Lowland League with Cowdenbeath is, you would say, unremarkable. But by all accounts, I think everyone speaks quite highly of him. And Cowden, I don't imagine, have a fantastic budget and anything like that. Is if it doesn't work out, then he's replaced probably the most popular manager in Bonnyrigg's history. And that's a huge job to do. So if he ends up taking them down, they'll start next season with a manager who's replaced a really popular manager and who's taken them down. And you know what the fans are like, because you know what football fans are like. Oh, well, if we'd stuck with Robbie, then we wouldn't have gone down. It'll be like the first thing people will say. For what it's worth, I think that they are in, or certainly if they'd kept everything as it was, they were in massive danger, because they just didn't look very good. To be brutally honest, they're okay defensively. They offer next to nothing going forward. And as soon as Suns went ahead, that was it. I think if you watch the highlights, Connor Doan has a shot. I think it's Connor Doan has a shot from the edge of the box, which is straight at Jay Hogarth, like kind of hits it in the half volley, and it just rolls into his gloves. That was the only shot they had on target in the game. And this is a Dumbarton team that, it's not like last season's one that just shitfests their way to 1-0 wins. Like, we've been quite open at the back. It's not like playing Steny, who, aside from that freak Clyde result, have been ridiculously strong defensively all season. It's not like playing that. Like, we're a team who would give you chances. The pitch is so dodgy as well. There's always going to be defensive mistakes. They just never really looked like scoring. So I'm not surprised that they acted. And I'm really interested to see how it works out. Really interested, because I walked away on Saturday and went, they'll finish bottom. And now I'm not so sure.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. I can see why the club have just done it, because it is desperation. The crowds boomed over the previous couple of campaigns, and that was selling fans on the kind of SPFL dream. Like, first of all, getting there and laying waste to their opponents in the lower league, and watching an attacking team, a fun team, a team that wins just about every week. And then they go up, and it's like, okay, now we're an SPFL club. And I think in their first season, they got something like 200 extra season tickets. And that's great for any team at the League 2 level. And since then, they've been served up a lot of shite, really. It's just not been fun to watch. It's not been a fun team to watch. That's a terrible pitch to play on. The team can't really even play any football, but even still, I think they're basically a kind of more of a kind of agricultural team regardless. And so you can see why they've done it. It's just, I suppose it is the timing. Because you kind of thought for months, if Clyde were going to make a recovery, ever since like February, you looked at Bonnyrigg, and we're in March now, but like we're nearly in April. If you look at the start of February, if you look at like 2 months ago, say, right, if Clyde are going to make a recovery, it's Bonnyrigg you're going to be worried about. We've said it. I've said it. Telfer said it. I think Shaughan said it as well. They have been the team that you've kind of looked at and gone, they're the one in trouble if Clyde do manage to pick some results up and put some form together. Clyde are now doing that. And so you have to ask the question, right, okay, if you weren't going to get rid of, did they just hope? I think they just hoped and prayed. I think that's it. I think they just thought, right, please, let's just get some results. Let's just, because they are in. Like, that's the thing. They never get hammered.
No.
They never get hammered. They manage to stick into every game. And that's maybe a bit of a problem as well, because that shows you that they're not exactly not playing for the manager. That shows that they're fighting, that they're kind of disciplined, organised. They just don't really have any quality. And if that's the case, unless Callum Elliott could come in and in 6 games unlock some of that quality, or who knows, maybe it's just a case of you just get somebody coming in saying, right, forget about everything before, this is a fresh start, go and try and play your best football kind of thing, and that gets a reaction, then maybe you can squeeze a wee bit more out of the forward players, and that'll get, as you say, get Bonnyrigg to the 2 victories they need to stay in this division, perhaps, but it does feel like it's a bit of a panic decision that's been made too late in the day.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting. There was a lot of talk about Callum Elliott's style being, I think a Cowden fan had said something like, do Bonnyrigg have the players who'll be able to play out from the back and like play a decent bit of possession football? No. Based on what I've seen, like quite the opposite. The Bonnyrigg are at their best as a kind of battling side. They'll drag you into a fight and then nobody will outfight them. And at no point did they chuck in the towel on Saturday. They just aren't very good. Like they have a lot of players there who I think Robbie Horn was maybe guilty of being too loyal to. And I understand that. Like, if you've had great success with those players in the past, you want to give them their chance. And I actually thought over the summer they'd maybe do a wee bit more business just to turn guys on. They started with their midfield of, I think, Callum Conley and Johnny Stewart on Saturday. And I looked at that and thought, it's not a League Two. It's not a League Two midfield. Like, that's just, I don't know what it's going to give you aside from a bit of battling quality. Two of them can pass fine, but they're not going to unlock your defences. Neither of them's going to drive with the ball right through the middle or, take the game to Suns in any way. And that proved to be the case. They were just completely outrun by Dumbarton in midfield because we're just too sharp, too quick, had that wee bit extra quality that they just kind of lacked. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if there's quite a big turnover of players there in the summer. Obviously, you've got a manager in who's wanting to bring in new ideas and all that. But if Callum Elliott wants to come in and play really nice, building up from the back football, he is aware that they play at probably the worst / second worst pitch in the country. Like
I think they've had problems with their groundsman in the last couple of years. I think Amy told us about it. Somebody maybe left or something like the year before last, something along those lines. So they could something maybe the club could sort themselves.
Problem with groundsman equals dodgy pitch. Yeah, that's something Dumbarton can copy and paste over. That's certainly been the issue there since our previous groundsman left and the new guy came in and the pitch has just gone right downhill. So yeah, I think this has maybe given me new hope for Bonnyrigg in the short term, but long term I'm not sure how well this is going to work out, especially when you've brought in a manager who, in barefaced facts, I think Cowden were 11th in the Lowland League or there or thereabouts. They had a 10-10-10 record, so you've got a manager with a 33% win ratio in the league below you've brought in to save you from relegation. It looks like a big gamble.
Yeah. Is there anything new to say about Dumbarton at all after this one?
We might be hitting form for the playoffs. That's certainly the hope. Last season, things tailed off horribly towards the end of the season, culminating in that 6-0 loss down at Annan in the first leg. The season before that, they got relegated in the playoffs. I think it was a run of something like 1 win in 9, 1 win in 10 towards the end of the season. Does feel like Dumbarton are starting to build a wee bit of momentum. Mark Durnan being back is huge. He was absolutely outstanding. I think he got in your team of the week as well. He was absolutely outstanding. And I looked at him and thought, Christ, if we had him fit, so he's been out since October and only returned against East Fife at the start of the month, we'd had him fit throughout the whole season. I think Stenny would still have won the league, but I think there would have been more of a title race because he looks a real class above and Suns basically just look like a bit of a basket case at the back without him. So players coming back at the right time. Finlay Gray's hitting form. Mark Durnan's back. Callum Wilson's just came in. He's been out since signing in the summer. Feels probably the best way of putting it is more positive now than it's felt at any stage in the season, which given that, 3-4 weeks ago we were beaten 5-0 by Stranraer, quite an impressive turnaround. So I think Suns fans are maybe cautiously optimistic.
And if anybody's listening and wondering why we didn't talk about Stenhousemuir against Peterhead when the entire terrace, the majority of the terrace was there on a hospitality day out, it is because that is the worst game of football I have seen all season. And that is any standard. I have been at this campaign, I have been at Pollock, I have been at Arthurlie, I have been at Maryhill Juniors, a game where there wasn't even linesmen. And that was the worst game I have seen all season. Nothing happened. It was fucking rotten. And
it's the top two in League Two as well. The best two clubs in that division.
It was two teams that were just like, you could tell, like Stenny are just like, Telfer had said this, to be fair to him already. Telfer had said this, like Stenny are just like waiting for the full-time whistle, waiting for them to just be crowned champions. And Peterhead, like going away to Stenny, they just like, I think themselves are just happy. Yeah, take a point, whatever. Like, doesn't really, how much difference does it matter to them finishing second or third? They still want to obviously finish above Spartans, I would say, and play Dumbarton first rather than play whoever finishes 9th in League Two, especially if it's like a resurgent Annan team. But still, there wasn't really any kind of desperation on their part either, so it just led to this match that Guff.
Complete
Absolute guff.
non-event.
Oh, it was so bad. So bad.
Did the hospitality make up for it though?
Yes, for the very good time. Very good time. Right, and that'll do us. Thank you very much to Fraser for joining me.
Thank you for having me. They're your third choice, and you're the listener's seventh choice for the lower league show, so that's good.
I'd be happy to make the top 7. And if you'd like to hear more from us, if you'd like to hear more from people who know what they're talking about, there have been several lower league podcasts that have gone up on the Patreon in recent weeks. There was, as I mentioned earlier, one with Andrew Young on Inverness I've very much enjoyed. Jake Ferguson joined Craig Cairns to talk about Dunfermline last week. We have recently had... Actually, there's about to be loads of others. There's 2 involving Amy about Bonnyrigg Rose, and there's loads. I aim to at least do 1 or 2 lower league specialty shows on the Patreon per week where I talk to a fan of a club that I find particularly interesting at that point in time. And there will definitely be more to come in the coming weeks. So yeah, the patreon.com/Terrace Podcast. And also as well, please, if you have a YouTube subscription, please subscribe to YouTube channel, youtube.com/Terrace Podcast, or just set Terrace Scottish Football Podcast in the search bar. Click subscribe button, add to the mounted army we have, get us closer to 1,000 subscribers. I really want to get there before the end of the campaign. I asked you guys recently who are listening to the show, we've had a recent bump up. It's after it's really started to slow down. I was like, we might not get there by the end of the campaign. I asked everybody, our listeners have responded. I'm asking you, for those of you who haven't done it yet, to keep that going, and we will definitely get there. We'll reach our goal in plenty of time. So I thank you in advance for that. And I think that'll do it. I shan't bore you anymore with any more plugging. And I'll simply say goodbye. And for this weekend, enjoy your football, but please do so respectfully.